This is a session on the gift of submission, uh, which almost seems uh, like a complete paradox or a misnomer or something. We have such a strong bias in Western world to be in control. And this has to do with the arena of power. Our last session was about relationships, the relational polarity, and the quality of love, and all the related virtues and qualities that are all central elements of human resilience. But in every relational environment, there are also power dynamics. And these tend to be demonized quite often. For instance, in postmodern dialogue, everything boils down to who has the power. There are always just central power dynamics. And there are people who are in control, and there are people who are victims, and that's it. And submission is not a very attractive quality. And in everyday usage, it's important to realize that the balance of polar dynamics with regard to control and submission. Our ego tends to be closely identified with control. Sometimes we just can call it the controller. But control is just a power dynamic, and submission is a power dynamic. And sometimes there's a tremendous power in submitting appropriately under the circumstances. And again, with every polarity, we realize that it isn't just a tug of war between one or the other, that they exist together, and then they begin to interpenetrate. And there's a sense of submission within control, and control within submission. And as we drop down to the still point, a place where power dynamics are irrelevant, it's a place of deep and utter peace. Let me just request that come forward within you, a deep quality of transcendent peace. In this moment, no matter what issues are in your life, there's a concrete sense of no conflict here. There's a mental and emotional quality of peacefulness. And there's a deep spiritual quality of peace that transcends any kind of understanding, just an utter deep peacefulness. Just notice what this place of transcendent peace feels like. The gift in the context of this stillness of feeling a deep quality of peace that underlies all the conflict and chaos and commotion and struggles of life. You can hold this, you can have a practice to dwell in this, to come from this place of deep peace that runs throughout your whole being, your physical being, your emotional being, your mental being. And that spiritual dimension is peace. Peacefulness outside of space and time. Without beginning or without end. Which is an opening to that transcendent quality of love and one's deepest wisdom. But in order to access and hold this place of, this abundant place of peacefulness, one needs to practice humility. Humility of not being the controller, not being the center of all things, being deeply connected to something deep and transcendent. And when we are humble enough to move our ego aside and to connect and be centered in this place of deep and utter peace, it's not only a place of love, but it's a place of inspiration. It's touching into our deepest wisdom. And creativity. And from this place of humility and peacefulness, there is a virtue of doing which flows out of that, a quality of inspired influence. And these tend to be qualities that are the opposite of how most people wield power, where it's all about what can I control. It's really about using all of your control to help you submit to this place of stillness and emptiness and openness, and moving your ego side with utter humility to be open to this place, to this source, that your influence in the world might be inspired. And the transcendent polarity that flows out of this inspired influence is a quality of transcendent firmness and transcendent gentleness. Coming from this deep spiritual place doesn't mean that you are necessarily not firm when that's called for. Maybe you need to call upon the deepest firmness that can be accessed to deal with a situation appropriately. But there's always a gentleness there, and access to a gentleness. Always a paradoxical quality of a firm gentleness or a gentle firmness. Whatever the emphasis is or your primary disposition is, the other is there. And this is not unrelated to gender equality either. The feminine gender tends to be more gentle. But what a great gift to have firmness in that gentleness. The masculine gender is grounded most deeply in firmness. But what a great gift to have gentle firmness, to express whatever power is given to you, to have your influence be inspired with gentle firmness or firm gentleness. And in that place of deep inner peace, tied to this relational quality of trust and love that we went over in the last polarity, there is the great gift of complete submission to the ultimate. You don't completely submit to anything other than the ultimate. You might hold that as the divine, as the absolute, as your higher self. but to have control and submission come together for the ultimate act of submission in that relationship to the absolute. What absolutely flows through is love. And whatever inspired influence you have, whatever creative insight or brilliance there might be, it's empty if it isn't grounded in love. And in that relationship with the absolute, with the divine, however you frame it, that is love. In the traditions, God is love. And let that flow through you by completely submitting to that source. What a great gift submission is. Thank you.